Hi, we're back at the Mamba Ryu Institute with the open letter to President Obama. And we left off with religious questions about the perspective here with the narco-revolution. So now our next question is, how is religion related to the intelligence agencies' reductionist myopathy that you mentioned earlier?
You mean to their general incompetence? Okay, well, I believe I was mentioning the unwillingness to recognize religion or religious ideology at the very core of the economic and political and social issues we're dealing with. Now, social issues, political issues, economical issues, those three. And I mentioned that religion is at the core of those three. Why would we not want to recognize that religion is at the core, for example, of societal issues or of the problems of the community? Because we have a tradition that dates back to the very origins of our beginnings of our nation. That religion is something you don't touch. You don't get into, you don't try to alter people's systems of beliefs or what goes on in their head, because that's violating, or conceived of as violating, their most sacrosanct, again, religion, rights. In fact, one of the limitations that you have as a psychologist, according to the APA, aside from sleeping with your patients, is you can't get into their religious perspectives. You can't try to alter their religious views, and so it doesn't matter that you may think that religion or their worldview is at the core of their psychological problems. You can't go there because they can sue you. That's considered something very inappropriate, even criminal on the part of our of American ideology. So religion is something that's sort of off the table when you look at problems, because if it's on the table as a problem, you're not allowed to address it as a solution. So since you can't address it as a solution, best, and there goes a reductionist myopathy, best pretend that it's not on the table as a problem. Okay, so if you have this big elephant, okay, taking up most of the room, but since you're not allowed to touch the elephant or even address the elephant there, everyone is like glued to the wall and trying to get around the walls, right, to get across the room, but we can't address the elephant. Well, we need to address the elephant because the elephant is killing us. I could make a really crude joke out of that, but I won't. But okay, the elephant is killing us here. Now, how is the elephant killing? I'll give you an example. So back to, if religion is at the problem of our social issues, that means we have no choice but to address religion, which means that everything about religion and every religion is on the table for criticism, and we don't want that. Okay, we don't want that, but okay, that is at the core of our problem. That's easy to demonstrate. Okay? That's easy to demonstrate. For example, now this links religion and politics in terms of, let's say, the war on terror. Some people have said, well, this is really a war of worldviews. Okay, and certainly if they're a part of the government, they wind up disappearing or being restationed in Juneau, Alaska, or someplace, okay, because that's not something that anyone wants to acknowledge. But let me give you some statistics. Okay, percentage of Muslims from Muslim countries that approve suicide bombings. Okay, percentage of Muslims from Muslim countries that approve suicide bombings. Nigeria, 42%. 42%, amazing a Muslim country, 42% of Muslims in Nigeria approve of suicide bombings. Lebanon, 34%. Turkey, 16%. Okay, Palestinian territories, 70% of all Muslims, which is Palestinians, think that suicide bombings are a way to dispense justice. Now, internationally, we wonder why the Israelis take the measures that they take against Palestinians. But when 70% of the population believes that suicide bombing is a way to carry out justice against you, forget courts of law. Okay, we're just going to send, if need be, our children, because after all, If they die in this process, they go to heaven, or they go to paradise, I'm sorry, okay? That is a problem. That is a political problem, that is a social problem. Now, as far as economy, now, not too long ago, I've got here an article that's based on some research from Gallup poll, Gallup survey, conducted a survey in over 100 countries, and religion has surprisingly a very high correlation with poverty. So if you look at some of the poorest nations in the world are the most religious. Now, America appears to be an exception to that rule. So our degree of religiosity is fairly high for a first world nation. Okay? It appears to be, but it's not really. Okay? When you actually take America and you break it down and you realize that the poorest states in the nation are the most religious. The states with the lowest socioeconomic status, the states where their children have the poorest academic performance, are your most religious states. They're also the states, they're also the Bible Belt and the slavery states. Okay, so this whole business, racial bigotry, religion, poor academic performance, and poverty go together. Okay, that's if you look at it in terms of from states. If you look at it in terms of ethnicities, okay, well, no surprise, your most religious ethnicities are the blacks and Hispanics, African American and Hispanic American, and they are also the poorest. They also have the highest rate of teenage pregnancies. They also have the highest rate of gang membership, etc. Religion is at the core of these problems. Now, someone can say, well, correlation is not causation. Well, that's true. Correlation is not causation. Okay, so where does it start? Does poverty make people more religious, or does being religious make people poorer? Okay, well, that's kind of a chicken or an egg thing, and we know that that's really a fallacy, because the chicken came first by evolution. Problem with religion is it closes your mind. It establishes barriers to your reasoning. It says, this is the way it is. I don't care what evidence you put before me. Reason may not enter into my conclusion here. It is this way, or conversely, it is not this way. I don't care what you say. I don't care what the evidence is. That's the way it is. That's a problem. So wherever, it's not surprising, therefore, that poverty and religion go together, particularly in the modern world, particularly now that we're well into the 21st century, in which what we need are people who think, people who can create, people who can innovate. We need a population that is scientifically literate. Okay? When you're dealing with populations that still believe that the human being was made from mud or from a blood clot, as in the case of the Muslim faith, you have a significant problem, because they are completely disenfranchised with the 21st century. So they are completely incompetent, incapable of taking stock of the issues that are going on within their society and the world at large. They're stuck with a version of Windows that is 30 years old or 20 years old. Okay, they need to really get updated, so they can't run the modern programs. When they can't understand, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of research that has to do with what it means to be human. That's coming from the sciences. Evolutionary psychology, sociobiology, paleoanthropology, etc. It's a lot of the research that I've included in my series, a 10-book series, which is Chronicles of the Perfect Storm. And all of that knowledge, all of that information, all of that research is completely off the table for these people. They're stuck in a different century, and the world is moving on. And that's threatening to them.
Okay, sorry, so what you're saying is, to summarize together, religion is related to the Hispanic poverty and corruption.
Definitely. Well, for example, now we've got to do a little bit of history here. We have to do a little bit of history. What makes the modern world? What are the ideas that make what we know? The modern world is the result of series of historical trends, that include humanism and the Renaissance. It includes the scientific revolution. It includes enlightenment. It includes the Industrial Revolution. Okay, those four principally, okay, primarily. Now the modern era, modern age begins in 1789 with the French Revolution. It's kind of a date that most, if not all, historians agree upon. Okay, so what was, and I'm not sure if I mentioned the Reformation, but what was the humanism in the Renaissance, the Reformation, scientific revolution, and the Industrial Revolution? What was Spain's contribution to these historical events or trends? Basically none. Okay, when we look at what makes the modern world modern, okay, we're going to come up with French names. We're going to come up with a lot of British names. We're going to come up with quite a few German names. We're not going to come up with very many Spanish names. With one exception would be, for example, Ramon y Cajal, father of modern neuroscience, because he discovered that the brain was composed of cells and not just some kind of spaghetti-like substance that extended. Okay, but that's like one thing. But generally speaking, when we have the Protestant Reformation at the beginning of the 16th century, when Martin Luther makes he puts up his theses and he's complaining about the Catholic Church and all the corruption within the Catholic Church, that in and of itself is the result of certain ideological trends that were taking place in Europe, and it's caused by, but it also causes a series of changes in that part of Europe's form of thinking, their own ideology, because now you have a break with an institution, a religious institution that is controlling all aspects of society, which was the Catholic Church. So one of the benefits, so to speak, of the Protestant Reformation is now the individual believer is directly responsible for his relationship with God, as opposed to having to go through an institution. So it makes him more of an active participant in terms of his relationship with God, and it makes him have to read. He has to read the Bible. Okay, that augments literacy. It leads to, in conjunction with other trends that were taking place. Of course, I mentioned the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, okay, and then the Industrial Revolution in Britain. So we have a series of phenomena of transformation, society and politics and economics, philosophy, etc., that are taking place in Northern Europe, and which Spain is excluded from. They didn't exclude, Spain excluded itself. With the counter, Spain has its counter-reformation. What does it do? It just locks within itself. It creates all sorts of monastic orders, like the Jesuits, okay, to protect themselves, shield themselves from the transformations that eventually lead to atheistic societies. And we look at the societies of Germany and the Netherlands and Sweden and Norway, etc. Well, process of generations, the liberation that the psychological and social liberation of the Reformation ultimately leads to breaking away with religiosity in and of itself. However, Spain and therefore Latin America don't participate and don't benefit from all of this. So essentially what happens? They're stuck 4 or 5 centuries behind the rest of Europe. Now, in the United States, we benefited from particularly the involvement of men like Thomas Jefferson in the Enlightenment, and how they were very, very steeped in Enlightenment philosophy and theory and social ideology, etc. But you don't find anyone comparable to a Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams in Latin America. You don't find that. Okay, so even from the get-go, end of the 18th century, what leads to the formation of the United States is an ideology, social ideology that is, although it is quite religious as far as our terms today, it's far less religious than what you have in Latin America. and we're seeing the consequences. The only way Latin America can compete in a modern society is through this new product. No longer, it's not bananas anymore, it's not sugar, it's not coffee, it's not, okay, now what is it? It's cocaine, etc. Now it finally found, but essentially it has not revolutionized itself as being a creator of technology, because culturally speaking, they're not into creating ideas.
Now I see you do mention Thomas Jefferson in your letter.
Mm-hmm.
How is Thomas Jefferson's argument relevant to your letter?
Well, it's completely relevant in terms of, if you notice how I open, this is a quote, this is a letter, a segment of a letter from Thomas Jefferson to Alexander von Humboldt on December 1813. And if you notice how that quote begins, it says, "History, I believe, furnishes no example of a priest-ridden people maintaining a free civil government." What he meant by a priest-ridden people, essentially a people whose worldview is essentially religious or governed by religious institutions. 200 years later, 201 years and X weeks and a few days later, what we have in Latin America is just proof that history still doesn't furnish an example of a priest-ridden people, okay, that are capable of founding and sustaining a free civil government. We haven't had. All this time, the United States has been in business as a country. Okay, we've had one civil war. Okay, we've had one civil war. In the meantime, if you look at the histories of Latin American countries and of Spain, we've had nothing but political turmoil. We've had nothing but dictatorships. We have nothing but political instability. We've had nothing but violence. We've had revolutions. We haven't had anything that would disconfirm what Thomas Jefferson's prediction. So I think that's a very important quote, because it says, look, this is what happens when your mind is locked away in a religious vault. You can't grow. There's no progress, and there isn't the kind of progress that would lead to a free civil society. Now, Thomas Jefferson's observation extends. It can be generalized far beyond a priest-ridden people. It can be generalized to an imam-ridden people. If you look at the other religious countries around the world, they're pretty much in the same boat. Muslim countries, for example. Muslim countries, well, Catholic countries in general, with the possible exception of Italy. But then the countries that are in trouble in Europe, Portugal, the pigs. I didn't create that acronym. It must have been a German or something. But anyway, pigs, these are the countries that are in trouble, economically in trouble, the pigs. Portugal, Italy, okay, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. Okay, 4 of them are Catholic. The other one is Orthodox, which is pretty closed. Again, they didn't benefit from a Reformation or Enlightenment, etc. And so they're always going to struggle economically. They're always going to struggle politically, and their societies are going to suffer as a result.
Thank you. Now, you also mentioned on page 11 about the necessary self-critical philosophical analysis. Why do we lack that self-critical philosophical analysis?
Okay. As a culture.
As a culture, yes.
Well, again, that does go back to religion. If we look at the Declaration of Independence, I have a copy here, the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We have, this is the basis upon which, the premises upon which our country was founded. It says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which, and here it comes, the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Okay, now that may seem like something small, But in the second paragraph, it continues with, all men are created equal, that they are endowed, this is very ironic in a country that was up to its neck in slavery at the time, that they are endowed by their Creator, there we go again, by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, etc. Okay, so we have at the core of Americans' identity the concept of God. What is the problem with that? Well, at the time it wasn't a big deal. Okay, but we're talking a long time ago. Okay, we're talking the end of the 18th century. Now into the 21st century, okay, we run into some very significant problems when we don't want to disenfranchise ourselves from God as the central concept around which, okay, we conceive ourselves. Because that blocks you from philosophical analysis. In fact, most Americans, if they're hearing this, they say, well, what good is that? What good is philosophical analysis? Well, okay, the lack of philosophical analysis is what brought the demise of Islamic countries. It's what brought the demise of Catholic countries. And although we benefited in this country from the Protestant Reformation, okay, we're still tied to that concept of God, okay, just like these other countries and then in their cultures, except we have a longer tether. Okay, our longer tether has allowed us to prosper for a greater amount of time, but now we're running out of rope. Okay, we're running out of rope, and we need to redefine ourselves. We need to be ridden of that 18th century concept so that we can evolve and prosper into this coming century for reasons that I explain in depth in various books throughout the series. And I think we're out of time for this segment.